Hey team, welcome back to another episode of the Strength Game Podcast. I'm your host, Nick O'Brien, and this is episode number 12. The Strength Game is a weekly podcast dedicated to discussing all things physical culture with the coaches, athletes, iron enthusiasts, and experts deeply embedded in the strength game on both sides of the profession, both as competitive athletes and as coaches. I want to thank everyone who has liked, shared, and commented. Your support allows us to continue to bring on expert guests and highlight more individuals in the strength game, just like our guest today. I also want to thank Cerberus Strength for bringing you this podcast for free. Trusted since 2012, Cerberus is making the best strongman, powerlifting, and strength sports equipment and accessories, ensuring the ultimate competitive edge. Every one of their products is tried, tested, and proven by top-level athletes worldwide. Whether it's competing on the big stage at World's Strongest Man or training at home in your gym, Cerberus Strength equipment is reliable, durable, and of course, strong enough to handle all your training goals and needs. So if you're in the market for the highest quality strength and conditioning gear and equipment, be sure to check out CerberusStrength.com and use our promo code STRENGTH_game. That's STRENGTH_game to save on your next order. So in this week's episode, I'm joined by another fellow Highland Games competitor and athlete, Matt Adams. Matt is an assistant coach at Marshall University for the throwing events. In addition to his coaching role with the throwers, he leads the strength conditioning for the track and field program, including the throwers, sprinters, jumpers, and cross-country disciplines at Marshall. Prior to his current position, he spent time at Central Michigan University, Olivet Nazarene University in Illinois, and the University of Wisconsin-Platteville. Matt himself is a four-time National Junior College All-American thrower in both javelin and discus, as well as a javelin thrower at the University of Oregon. Currently, he trains and competes nationally in Highland Games in the lightweight division. And I'm excited to have him on today. So with all that said, let's get in the game with Coach Matt Adams. All right, what's going on, guys? I'm excited. I'm joined by a fellow Highland Games athlete and coach and strength coach also, Matt Adams. We only see each other once a year at nationals. Unfortunately, COVID kind of drew us away from each other this season. But, hey, I'm excited to have you on the show today, man.
I'm excited. Thanks for having me, man.
Hey, so let's get right into it. I want to kind of know how you first got it started in the sports and then eventually competing in Highland Games and collegiate throwing. So you could give a little bit of backstory about what got you going, what sports you played growing up, stuff like that.
Yeah, man. So I guess I started with the traditional sports that pretty much everybody starts with. You know, I played football, wrestled, tried to play basketball, but I wasn't any good, and then did track. And from there, I kind of, I took like a half a year off of graduating high school and just try to find myself, and then ended up walking on at a junior college and found a niche for throwing a jav. I was always had a pretty decent fastball. I threw, almost 90 miles an hour in high school. So that kind of stemmed a good relationship with the jav and got me to college and beyond.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know from there you were junior college, and you were four-time All-American there, and then you actually went to Oregon for a season. How was that experience?
Yeah, so like I said, the jav for me, it was real fast. You don't have the jav in Arizona high school, and I think it took me my third week of throwing, I was like the number one U20 in the United States. So it happened fast. It's not like I really worked my tail off in that 3 weeks. I, had some God-given talent that just was bestowed upon me, and I found a little bit of a niche. And, so from there, I took the traditional thrower's mindset of more is more, and led to a bunch of injuries. But, eventually I got to a coach that, kind of steered me in the right direction, and we kind of mapped out a little bit of a plan for JAV.
That's awesome. And then after that, I mean, I think most people that are involved in track and field, either college or high school, you kind of hear about Highland Games as an alternative if you're not going to go to the Olympics at that high of a level. So for those that kind of don't know, can you give like a brief background on what Highland Games is and what initially got you started in that?
Yeah. So the Highland Games, just 9 events. There's a lot of overlap with some of the traditional throwing events. So you have 2 stones, 2 hammers, which the hammer is done on a pole instead of a wire, as opposed to the Olympic hammer. 2 weights for distance, a sheaf, a caber, and a weight over bar. So it's 9 events. You're out in the field. It's done cross-country scoring. So if you win one of the events, you get 1 point. If you get second, you get 2 points. And at the end of the day, you get the lowest score wins the meet. My kind of origin story with that really started as I got out of throwing jav. I probably extended my career maybe a few years longer than it was supposed to. And as I got done, I didn't really end on my own terms because of injuries and different things like that. And as I got out, I was looking for something else. And, eventually I started boxing again. I boxed when I was young. And so I started boxing again, doing some of that. And didn't like getting punched in the face. That's not too fun the older you get. And then eventually I found Highland Games when we got connected with a group of people out in Michigan, and just kind of went from there.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's kind of how, same thing I found it. Kind of having a little heritage, like being Irish, is kind of helped. And then doing strongman, it was kind of flirted with it on some competitions, like Highlander ones, where you could do both. And it was just a fun thing. Like I never got to throw in high school or college or anything. So being able to go and wear a kilt and chuck stuff was always a fun alternative for sure. So like when you got out and you were done throwing javelin in college, like I know you said didn't kind of end on your own terms. And I think that's unfortunately a lot of people's direction after college, or you hope it's not an injury that kind of sidelines you, but it's a good thing that you actually got to find a sport where you could continue to actually compete in. But what actually got you into coaching? Because I know you had a lot of experience as a thrower. What got you involved in wanting to pursue coaching throwers?
Yeah, so when I first got done, it was probably the first 5 years. I was still trying to live the dream. So I followed my wife, she followed me to college, so I followed her. I got hooked up with a Division III team, and really I got hooked up to use their facility. So I'd have a training facility to be able to do what I wanted to do. And I met the coaching staff, and they said, "Hey, why don't you just come out and maybe show the kids a few things, do a clinic or something like that." And then I found I kind of liked a lot of the kids. They were really good. They were more so at the beginning they were training partners, because we were just a couple of years in age difference. And so it kind of started with that, but I really had no intention to be a coach. I wanted to either get into nonprofits, work with at-risk youth, or something along those lines. And through just luck, I guess it kind of stemmed from there. And really just out of need to use the facility, use the weight room, that process kind of started.
Yeah, it's funny how those things work. And I know now you've been coaching for like 13 years at the college level at different capacities, right?
Yeah. It's been kind of a run. I had to actually this morning I had to do it on the fingers, like check how many years that was. And I think this is start of year 14.
Oh, there you go. That's awesome. And it's a cool thing. I mean, D3 is a different level to be able to kind of balance both. And so you've got a little experience everywhere. Like I know another school in Illinois, Central Michigan, and now at Marshall. You're at a unique kind of position, though, now is one of the big things I wanted to like talk to you about, because in addition to your role as a throws coach, like on the staff and having like your extensive background on it's perfect, but you're also the strength coach for basically the entire track and field team. So kind of, will you discuss a little bit like what like day to day you're doing, like, and how you manage both of those things? And then a little bit kind of what are some of the advantages that you have such an extensive throwing background and training personally. So what kind of advantages do you have to now being involved as a strength coach and a throws coach with your team?
Okay. Well, kind of my day-to-day, to tackle the first part of that, my day-to-day, I work with our sprints team twice a week, when everything's in full session. Our cross-country team and our sprints are, it's kind of the sprints, jumps, multis, all that kind of group compiled into that. So for them, usually twice a week, our cross-country twice a week, and then with my throwers from the strength side, we're usually 4 times a week in a weight room. The mornings are usually fairly dominated with the technical sessions that I do with the throwers. So those are usually broken up, and with COVID, they're broken up and a little more individualized, to space things out even more. And then the afternoons kind of transition into the strength part for the different teams. And then for my group, we usually lift in the late evenings. So that's kind of the structure that, the day breakdown is for me. I mean, I love it. I'm pretty much coaching all day, which is nice. It's better than, sitting in the office and, pounding keys and looking at a computer screen, at least, for me. And I would say, to tackle kind of the advantage of that, of me kind of running our strength is, in our office suite, I share, an office with our sprints coach, with our cross country coach, and the line of communication and what they want accomplished is pretty clear. And so if they have a really hard day, or if we need to make some adjustments, those happen. Those can happen really quick, just because we're always communicating. We're always kind of keeping that line open. That's kind of the advantage. I would say the disadvantage is, it's a lot. It's a full plate. And so trying to balance that without neglecting one particular group or one area is always kind of the balance. And there's also some issues, when it comes to summer and kind of vacations and stuff like that, because I'm listed as accountable coach. So that means I can't really work the voluntary workouts in the weight room. So I kind of lean on some other members of our strength staff to be able to do that, because I cover in both worlds.
Yeah, I can imagine how that's busy, especially recruiting too. You're on the road trying to actually bring more players in, and it's not too often at a Division I school where you see someone who is actually a sport coach that is fully leading the strength conditioning session. But like you said, there are some points in time where because you're in such a unique role and you drift more towards the sport coach side, some of those hours, like if anybody knows NCAA rules, like you have to like be basically non-existent with them for certain periods of time, which is kind of hard when you go from a point where communication, like you're at practice and you're in the weight room, you see them all the time, and then because of the rules, you're non-existent for a little bit. So it's kind of a hard balance, but that is a good point, like with the communication, where you have a direct line because you're on the staff and you know exactly what they want to see in the weight room for you, What kind of advice do you have for anybody that like is not in that role, like a strength coach specifically or a sport coach, trying to communicate back and forth between the other to make sure there is no disconnect when it comes to on-field performance or in the weight room performance?
Well, I know when I've had to deal with, and I've for the most part, I've always done my strength for my particular group. But I have had some brief moments where I've had to use a strength coach. And the biggest thing is communicating, is making sure the expectations are laid out. Like what do they expect from you, and what do you expect from them? And making sure that's clear. And also knowing when to communicate. When you're a strength coach, you're wearing a lot of different hats. It's not like you're completely dedicated to a subgroup in track and field, the track and field throwers. You're also working with football, working with a bunch of other multiple sports. And if you have a event coach that's always in there hounding you, eventually it's going to get to a point where you don't want to see the guy anymore. So knowing when to communicate and is pretty big, and I think you get a lot more done that way.
Yeah, I like that. Laying out the expectations and even knowing when and even how, like what form of communication they like. Do they like just in simple text and email?
Yeah.
Do they want an office visit where you guys actually sit down weekly and discuss everything going on? Do they want to see the program? I think that creates some buy-in with the coaches. I know we talk a lot about buy-in with the athletes, but at the same time, that head coach is going to have a pulse on the players, and they talk to them all the time. So whether or not they're going to buy into your program makes a big deal, because at the end of the day, that head coach is going to be the one that's going to put a player on the field and play. So as much as strength coaches feel like they're heavily involved and want to be involved, a player is going to listen to the head coach more than anything else. So getting them on your side is huge. So with that stuff, like kind of considering that most coaches, whether they're sport coaches or strength coaches, don't have as an extensive background as you do. So you're the throws coach and you're doing strength conditioning for them and the track and field team, and also being involved in Highland games. That's 9 events. That's the same as someone doing multis. Since someone's not going to have quite as extensive background and be proficient and knowledgeable in those things, what do you see as kind of the biggest requirement for a coach that doesn't have necessarily that knowledge or background? Like a sport coach that doesn't have as much knowledge as strength conditioning, how do they kind of best educate themselves on the sports performance side? And then vice versa, how does a coach that doesn't know a lot about the specific sport, how do they educate themselves on the sport so they can best train them in the weight room?
Okay. So I think the way I kind of start really writing any sort of program is I always refer to them as the principles of basic physical education. And the first one is you have to know what you're trying to accomplish. So if you're trying to write programming for, say, a hammer throw, and you don't know what an Olympic hammer throw is, it's going to be pretty tough to get to the second step, which is the overload principle, is you have to know how to challenge that movement in order to get a response to get ultimately a better movement. And so the first thing that you would need to do is you'd need to have somewhat of a proficiency, and I don't mean actually doing the event or anything like that, but somewhat of an understanding of what you're trying to accomplish. And that way you're going to know, okay, well, what's the particular overload for this movement? Do I really need to bench this athlete? Do I really need to do, these movements, and that's kind of how I try to approach everything. The problem that I get when I'm writing for other people's, programs within ours is I don't really know the sprint event as well as our sprints coach. So the line of communication for me is I have to ask him, like, well, what are you trying to accomplish? And there's a lot of questions that go into this, like what are the demands of the event? Like what's important from like a tissue development standpoint, or what's some postural concerns, or some of those, and it helps me to better understand the event, and then I can come up with some creativity and find out, okay, what's a good way to overload this athlete to get a better response, and also getting to know the athlete and know, okay, this athlete is, it's deficient in this particular area. We can highlight this, we can individualize it, and kind of meet that athlete at their needs.
I like that. You say that a lot better than, unfortunately, some strength coaches I've heard. So to hear that you're doing both and that you understand basically how you even go about constructing a program and the ins and outs and the whys of what you're actually putting into it rather than just putting exercise on a piece of paper is awesome, because that goes to show that what you're doing, not only in the weight room, but what you're doing with those players, like that actually ties into their sport. You understand their sport. And that's something that I think a lot of coaches, strength coaches specifically, need to have a better understanding. And you said it, like, you're not going to necessarily be able to go and do those sports, especially at the same proficiency as a Division I player is going to do. But it's not a bad idea to go, if you've never dove before, if you've never swam, like, to go in and experience it. If you've never thrown, like, go to a practice, see what they're doing, like, hop in, like, have the players or have the coach, like, walk you through it. So then you get a better understanding than just reading it from a textbook or hearing it from a coach who's regurgitating. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
believe it or not, like, the hardest event for me to coach is the javelin, is the one that I have the most experience with. It's because I have so many built-in biases. Because for me, if there are stages that you have to develop, say stage 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to 10, I started at stage 6. I was good the minute I picked it up. I couldn't explain why I was good. Hey, I was just born with a real fast arm. But the athletes that I'm going to deal with, they might not be at that stage level. They might be at stage 1. And so for me, I had to work really hard at trying to be a good developmental jav coach. The other events have been really easy, or easier for me to learn, because I have no biases in them. I have no past history. I have no, other than just what I've learned. And so I don't say, hey, we're going to do this because I did this when I was an athlete, or this. We're going to do this, and I have to discover the reason why we're doing it.
that's a great point. I mean, I don't think people realize that. And seeing some of those higher level athletes, that it just kind of clicks for them, that they don't necessarily make the best coach. And honestly, in my point of view, they're not someone that you want to take every single piece of advice from. Everything they say, you got to take with a grain of salt. Because just like you said with javelin, like, you just had a fast arm, you picked it up real quick, and you didn't start at ground zero. It just came natural to you. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. Like, I don't want Usain Bolt to teach me how to run, because all he's going to say is, I forget who said it, he's just going to tell you to run faster. He doesn't understand it, because it just comes natural to him. So it's great that you talked about it being a developmental coach, where you actually went back and on your best event, you figured out, okay, if I'm coming from a newbie, or if I'm coming from someone that is at a different level than what I started, what are the things, how do I break down this movement to be able to teach this athlete in a segmented way, rather than, hey, just go out and throw as far as you can. Like, that's awesome to hear that, like, taking your best event and breaking it down so that anybody can understand it. So kind of with that, I wanted to touch on too, like, from your own personal training background and like how you trained from Highland games, and then even from your time when you first started coaching like D3 as like a coach, like throwing, like how has your own training evolved? And then what you do preparing for Highland games, does it impact or influence anything you do with your athletes, either on the field, getting them ready for collegiate throwing, or even in the weight room, just getting them ready for throwing in general?
Yeah, we have some principles that overlap. I mean, I think, especially some of the Highland games, they're just kind of fun and enjoyable things that are kind of break the monotony. So we do a few of those things. When I was in college, we threw PUDs, which is it's like a extended kettlebell. It's a specific a specific exercise for like specific strength development. So we did variations of Highland Games movements, and there are some overlaps with the stones and with the hammers and stuff like that. Uh, what was the other part of your question? Sorry.
No, no worries. No, I was just trying to figure out from your own like training, so like how you prepare for Highland games. Like, does any of like
Oh.
either the movements you use or like some of your periodization plans leading up to a competition, and in case for your athletes a meet, like does that influence what you do with them on the field or in the weight room or how you program?
Yeah, I would say that. Sometimes I use my own personal experience and get kind of the feedback that I get from training stimuluses and stuff like that. The one thing I've always been good at for whatever reason is I've always taken really good notes on a lot of the athletes that I've had, and I just I'm not super great on a computer, but I have a lot of Excel files, and at the bottom of a lot of the workouts that I've written, for whatever years, is I'll write notes on the responses that I've gotten from athletes from doing specific things. And in strength and conditioning, it's not a smooth science. You can't mix this element with this and you get the outcome. You and I could do the same exact workout and get two completely different responses out of it. So a lot of the time with keeping those notes on athletes, I try to predict trends, and okay, this athlete kind of has some qualities that this previous athlete I've had has. Maybe I'll throw them on this block of training and kind of see what happens. Like I got similar results from this, and we'll kind of see what happens. I think most of the training that I have, there's kind of some groundwork that's pretty well laid, and I wouldn't say that 90% or anything like that is set in stone, but there are some principles that we try to adhere to for everything. And then once the athlete gets older or the movement gets more specific, it gets very individualized. So it's like, what does this athlete need? And maybe in some situations, the athlete's at a stumbling block, and how do I get this athlete to the next stage of their development? And so with the Highland games and stuff like that, and really strongmen and those, sometimes I use those to sprinkle in a different response.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's great to hear. Like you hit more good points, like even from the strength conditioning side point, where it's not a smooth science, and throwing's the same way too. Like there's not going to be a technique that works for everybody across the board. And that's part of the art of it, and that's part of the art of the coaching side, where hey, you can predict trends. And I like how you take a lot of notes and make sure that okay, like I had an athlete 5 years ago and this is what happened, and this could potentially work for them because they have a similar buildup, they have a similar make, they rotate a certain way. So it's good to have those experiences, not just let them go wasted, and find a way to impact the next player you have, which is really cool to hear. And like you talked about, like predicting trends, that's a huge thing, and that plays a big goal in either throwing and trying to hit PRs, or in the weight room trying to hit PRs. Because if you can predict those things and something works real well for an athlete, then you can hopefully set them up for success at a meet. So with being like a metric driven sport like throwing, and then you also get to tie in hand with their like performance in the weight room. Like, when you talk about like trying to track trends, are there any indicators in the weight room you see have a really good carryover to success on the field? So like, if an athlete's like push press is like PRing, like now they go to shot put, like they're going to have more success. Have you found any sort of trends like that, whether from the weight room tie over to throwing is something you see as a good performance indicator?
Well, it's hard because it's not, it's not completely cut and dry. Like there are, I've had athletes that their speed strength is through the roof. Like they can move sub-maximal weight extremely fast and they perform really well, just with a tendo unit or whatever. I've had athletes where they get different bumps in strength performance, and then you could see, kind of some gains on the field that way. I'd say the biggest thing, and if I were to put like a priority list on the throwing events of what's the most important, you have to have a very strong back squat, front squat variation. That's a pretty big one. The Olympic lifts are tough because if you have a nasty kinetic chain that's happening and it looks ugly as ever, it's not going to transition to anything, so really that one, as long as like the sequencing is good and it's a high number, you'll probably get some good carryover and correlation from some of the Olympic lifts. I've heard people in the weight throw, which is the indoor hammer equivalent, hang snatch is a pretty big driver of performance there. But yeah, just I would say it's a little more on the individualized side. But the one thing, going back to the groundbreaking principles, is leg strength. Having good leg strength, having good pull power, good force through the ground. That's gonna be kind of the primary driver.
Yeah, that's where it all starts, from the feet
And we
up.
use different. Another thing too is we use different performance indicators. So, not so much in the weight room, but we do a lot of stuff with like a flying 20. Some of the speed development stuff. Throwing a shot, overhead back, a vertical jump. Standing long jumps, quad tests, different things like that you can get a pretty good high correlation with. And a lot of times, specific performance indicator, like, if someone standing throws a certain distance with a ball, they're gonna have the ability to throw a certain distance with a full movement. So some of those very specific indicators will help out.
I like it. I couldn't agree with you more. It's kind of cool though to see there is some carryover with it, but you do, again, just like all the other stuff you talked about, it's specific and it's unique to that athlete. So if they're not all going to be great Olympic lifters, you're going to dump it. If the sequencing's bad, all right, we'll find something else that has a good carryover, and then we can start using that as a predictor, because we know college and then Highland games, same way. You're peaking for a meet, you're peaking for a competition. It's not the same as a game schedule for another sport where you're playing the same day, like football, you're playing Saturday, 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 Saturday. Like, it's very different when you're going multiple of each events you got to like get ready for, and they're weeks separating them. And then the same thing when you get to nationals and NCAAs, and you have to peak for these regionals, you have to qualify from conference. So it's a lot different, and you can use those predictors to make sure you're appropriately progressing them, which is cool to hear. So since you do, like you said, strength coaches wear a lot of hats. You wear even more, because you're also a coach and you've got a lot of stuff you're doing on the outside and you're competing. So how do you kind of continue to sharpen the sword, like from the throwing side, from the coaching side, even strength conditioning? Like, what are some of the resources you recommend for those? Do they have some carryover? Are there any coaches you lean or follow?
Yeah, I mean, now with social media and stuff like that, I mean, I try to kind of stay connected as much as possible. There are a few, like, I guess, colleagues and friends that I do reach out to for information and stuff, and more so just to bounce some ideas off of. I don't know if like really over a phone conversation you can, find the complete answer, but you can definitely bounce some ideas, and if there's a level of trust, you can kind of open up about an athlete's development and get their point of view, and that way I can kind of eliminate some of your bias that you have on that athlete. Just having kind of the coaches that have either coached me or I've been close with, those are kind of the ones that I trust a little more. I mean, I've reached out to my college coach and asked him, questions, and I've had, different colleagues and stuff like that I'll reach out to. I would say my field of people that I reach out to is not, huge. It's not extravagant, at least in the throws coaches world. Most of the time I try to reach out more to, say, strength coaches or different people in the profession other than that. I think you had a guest on, and I've never met him, but he said something perfect that, when somebody reaches out to him, they talk about speed development. He doesn't give his advice. He kind of directs to another field. He directs to a performance coach, like a sprints coach or something like that. So a lot of the time I try to branch out, and instead of talking sports nutrition with a throws coach, I just rather talk to a nutritionist. Or instead of talking about strength development with a throws coach, I'd rather talk to a strength professional. And that way I can kind of get, directly to the source versus, secondhand information.
Yeah, you hit it right in the head. Yeah. Coach Sean Foster. Yeah. One of my mentors, he said that. I think that's who you're referring to. And
Yeah,
he was talking about just basically seeking out the experts in the field rather than a diluted version of it. Because both you and me, we have our own opinions. You have your own on throwing and competing and strength conditioning, and I have my own too. And they're deciphered from all our experiences and all the resources we have. So it's a good conversation to have between two people that trust each other and want to share that information. But if we're really trying to figure out like the X's and O's of it and actually dive deep, then you should seek out someone that their whole life is only dedicated to that piece of information. And then you can dilute it and figure out how to apply it to your own situation, which I think is awesome advice. And I think you do a good job of, because you do so many different things that if you try to find someone exactly in your situation that is competing in Highland games and is a throws coach and a strength coach, there's not very many people that do all those things. So you're going to get a very biased view of it rather than go find the best thrower, the best throws coach, the best strength coach, and then the people that are experts in it. So that's awesome. That's great. Hey, so we finished the show like any good training session with a good finisher. So I got 4 quarters, 4 questions, and maybe some overtime for you. So maybe a sudden death throw off.
Okay.
Hey, take as long as you want, or just fire them back off quick. We'll see how many we can get through. Ready?
Here we go.
All right. Hey, so biggest influence in coaching and your biggest influence in either Highland games or throwing.
So the biggest influence in coaching would definitely be he'd be my college coach, Lance Steele. And I think the biggest thing that I got from him is you need to take care of what's important in your life before you're worthwhile to anyone else's life. So I always try to approach that when I'm coaching is, if nothing fulfills me in my life, if I don't have anything that kind of fills me up, I'm not going to be worth a dang to anyone. I think we all start at the beginning of the year, ready to go, excited, energized, and then every practice you let a little bit of that out every single day. And he was the coach that kind of taught me, you need to have something that constantly fills you up. And for him, it was, his family, his relationships, and that made him a good person. So for me, that's definitely, that's an easy one. In terms of the Highland Games, that's a tough one because everybody's really nice. Everybody's, really good, really helpful. I've had so many great people in there that have kind of opened doors and really helped to get me involved. And it's such a great community, as you know, that people are just willing to bend over backwards to kind of help you. So I'd be doing a disservice to, the hundreds of people that have, kind of helped me and been great to me. And the great thing with the Highland Games too is it doesn't matter if you're, a world champ or anything like that. I mean, it's so easy to reach out to like Spencer, or it's easy to reach out to Carrie Overfelt or Mark Valeni or any of these people, that have done a lot of things. It's just so easy to reach out to them, and they're so willing to help. So, and that's kind of universal across, all Highland Games.
Yeah, that's awesome. I like that. You can't fill from an empty cup. So that's a great takeaway. Hey, so that kind of ties in the next thing. What are some of the things that really help you out? Like, what are you doing outside of coaching and training? What are some of your hobbies that help fill your cup up?
Yeah. So for me, it's, I Highland Games and coaching are really separate. So, I mean, that's a big one, still being able to train. Every once in a while I'll train with the athletes, but for the most part, I do like to train on my own time. It's kind of a good period of time where I can kind of put headphones in or just detach from like the regular reality for an hour or 2 hours or 3, 4, whatever it is. It's a good period of time. I like to cook as well, so having a good dinner at night. I like grilling, like a good cigar at the end of the night. That's, I've kind of gotten into that thanks to COVID a little bit more, with more of the free time and open windows. Probably not the healthiest thing for me, but it's all right. I live a reckless lifestyle, I guess.
That's awesome. Hey, so if you weren't coaching though, what career would you be in? You give any thought to that?
Well, I think, I think in the COVID time, every single person in athletics has given somewhat of a thought to that because we don't know the fate that we all lie. I would say it would be real nice to have my own gym or a performance center, something like that, where it's still loosely connected to, what I'm doing now. But, sometimes it's, you get caught up with, maybe working a 9 to 5 wouldn't be so bad, and making a bunch of money and free up some funds to have some really good hobbies and things like that. So, I would say owning my own gym, but then it could be maybe making a bunch of money doing something, doing sales, doing something else so that I could free up more time to do some traveling and spend more time with my wife. And, if we were to ever have kids, in the future, that would be, something I'd want to spend more time with, and you could do that more with a 9 to 5.
Yeah, I think unfortunately we've all thought about those things a little bit during COVID. But hey, so when you do put your headphones in and you get to train by yourself when the athletes are gone, what's your go-to training music or PR song? And then after you're done throwing, what's your go-to post-training meal?
Okay, so if I want to get, if it's max squat day and I've got one song that goes in, I'm gonna go with Megadeth, "Angry Again." And that was kind of my go-to as a jab thrower. And I would put that in, and this was back in the day where I had the handheld CD player, and I'd have to walk around, but I couldn't move too fast, because you'll skip that thing. I had to walk around and get jazzed up without skipping it. So I had to have a very steady hand, but it would definitely be Megadeth, "Angry Again." And then as far as a post-workout meal, I'd go with a cowboy ribeye, bone-in ribeye, thick, cooked on my own grill, rare.
Attaboy. All right, last one I got for you. All right, so overtime here. Since you are a coach and an athlete, and they can be separate, but what's the number one quality of a successful coach and an athlete? In your opinion.
That's a tough one. I would say I'll attack it from the athlete first. The number one quality for an athlete would be consistency. Would be the science of the success is really in the compliance, is showing up every day, putting in the work, and just doing the basic things at a very high level as much as you can. So consistency would be the number one for the athlete. For the coach, I would say, if I had to lump it into one, I would say passion, but it's not a really one size fits all. You have to have, you have to be consistent. You can't be Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, one day for the other. You have to be fairly consistent. Sometimes you have to be the energy of the group. Sometimes you have to be, whatever, but staying very consistent throughout your everyday, but it's not really a one size fits all in a coach. I would say, passion, showing them that you really care about who they are and their development, and that you're willing to go above and beyond to help them to achieve some things that they want to achieve. That's pretty big.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's awesome. Hey, Matt, like I said before, I'm excited. I was excited to have you on. Like, you threw out a lot of great things from all points of view: throwing, coaching, strength conditioning. So I hope next year, 2021, we get to see each other at nationals. That's always the goal. We only get to see each other once a year since we're so far apart. But hey, man, I can't thank you enough for coming on and taking some time to share with the audience today. So
that was great, man. Thanks for having me on.
Anytime, bud. Take care.
All right, brother.
That's it for this episode of The Strength Game. Thank you again to this week's guest and to our sponsors, Cerberus Strength. Be sure to connect and keep up with our guests at the links in the description below. Remember to subscribe to us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast provider to stay up to date on all future episodes. Also, check us out on YouTube and CoachO'Brien.com, where you can find all the video versions of these episodes, as well as show notes, episode schedule, and much more. Comments, ratings, and reviews are always welcome and appreciated. Thanks again for tuning in, and be sure to join us next week for another great episode of The Strength Game.